Well, Happy New Year, everybody. This is our first session of 2022. And like last year in beginning of January, I just like to sort of put my thoughts and observations out there for everyone. And just on what I see and anticipate might happen for our real estate market. So 2022. I guess the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to just talk about some opening observations I've seen through 2021 that I expect will carry over to 2022. I'm going to talk about some specifics in our province, going to talk about some stuff around Canada, and I'm going to end it off with just talking about how this is going to impact you as a realtor on what I see you should be doing to capitalize on 2022 marketplace. So first thing, one of the observations and some of the research that I went through, despite what we're seeing with all the shutdowns, and it's very unfortunate for certain industries, the actual unemployment in Canada right now is at or equal to where it was pre-pandemic levels. So right now, our unemployment rate in Canada is sitting right around 6%, which is roughly where it was back in, just before March of 2020 when the pandemic started. So at one point, it got up to as high as 15% during the pandemic, but now the economy is actually stronger and steadier than lots of people believe. Okay, so to keep that in mind, that unemployment, where it's at right now. Supply and demand, as we all know, right now supply and demand is very tight. And it's very tight across Canada. Okay, so it's something where usually you would get certain segments of Canada, especially certain parts of Ontario, that would have a tight marketplace where other ones would be balanced. But right now across Canada, the majority of the communities are having very limited supply. And we're going to talk about that. Another observation, and that's what's happening, and based on my conversations, is companies are and will expect employees back into the office. And maybe only for 2 days a week. So it's going to be a hybrid design. And right now they were anticipating January, and some have done it and then they pulled back. Some started back in September. But with my discussions with different companies, especially in the urban centers, so more so in your Ottawas, your Torontos, they're going to be calling and expecting the employees, especially if they're creative and sales departments, they're the ones that are looking to get back into the office. If it's like an e-commerce support, then the e-commerce support, they're saying, hey, you can basically,
Ready.
Somebody's got a dog yakking.
Oh, sorry.
And for once, it's not me, Scott.
Yeah, I fixed it. Anyway, so something to keep in mind. You are going to hear about that if you haven't already done so. Okay. The other thing that I really want you to pay attention to this year, in 2022, and we're going to talk about it further, is the bank of mom and dad is going to become really, really important. It has already been important over the last several years, to the point where last year the average gift, let's call it, was $170,000 from parents or relatives. 2 years ago, it was 75,000. Okay, so this year, my opinion is the gift of mom and dad or relatives is going to be way more important because of two factors. One, the idea that the values have appreciated so much in the last year that it's now going to affect the affordability. So they're going to have to look for further down payment. And in communities where you are in properties over $1 million, there's no longer CMHC. So now you have to deal with a 20%, minimum 20% down. So, and if you don't have it and you don't have the means of getting it, those particular buyers could be out of the marketplace. Okay, so that's one thing to look for. One of the other items that, and I was talking to a couple mortgage brokers towards the end of last year and one yesterday, private funding is becoming more and more involved, and not for so much private funding for like a private second, for the full values. Because the prices have jumped up so much, they're finding that they don't qualify for a stress test. Yet they have the ability of the income to service the debt, but they can't get qualified based on the stress test. So there are lenders out there that are lending money. They do look at least for the ability to support the loan, but they don't care about TDS or GDS. And they're basically putting money out at 7%. They charge a 2% lender's fee and a 2% brokerage fee. But consumers are actually, and have already started to do this, especially the ones that went into multiple offer situations, and then they ended up getting the property and then they didn't qualify. Okay, so one of the things I want to stress, and one of the things you're going to make sure you do is really, really important, as it always is, but more so this year, if you're dealing with buyers, you really have to go in depth into their financial situation and really look at getting them pre-approved, making sure that you've got everything in line. When I mean the pre-approval, it's basically like a full approval. You need all the supporting documents. You need everything that the lender's going to need, and look at, can they qualify? Okay, but private funding is really, you're going to hear more of that. And sometimes private funding can be used as a second to help secure the deal, but I was interested to hear how lots of people are doing the private funding for 1 year and then refinancing through the regular channels. Okay. And so that's where it's going to be important that as an agent, you're really going to need to know how to package that financing for that extra deal that you're going to, that extra deal is going to come that way. If you don't do it, unlike a few years ago, where that extra, that would be normally would be an average financing deal, two factors have happened. One, the stress test is actually higher now than it was 2 years ago. And prices have skyrocketed to the point where, they can't get that traditional financing as we talked about. So really, really important as as being a buyer's agent, working with buyers, you really got to do your due diligence in the beginning to make sure you've got that full finance package together. Okay, or you're going to be spinning your wheels and lots of frustration.
Has there been any issues? My biggest fear, exactly what you're saying is every deal I'm doing this year, I'm stuck in that exact boat. I've lost every 20 some offers I put in this year, lost every one of them. But here's my biggest concern I have is they're pre-qualified, pre this, pre that, but that doesn't mean the house you're buying without conditions, which is the only way you can buy it these days. What's happening as far as appraisal goes? Has anybody had any situation to where they bought a house 200,000 over asking price, and then the bank has come back and said, no, this is the value? Anybody have that?
It has happened even during the last year. So one of the conversations that you have to have with your buyers when you're doing the complete finance package is letting them understand there's a possibility that this may not appraise at the purchase price that you're going to be buying. So you have to have the ability to come up with more funds, because the appraised value is what the lender is going to advance the funds on.
Right. And I think we all have that discussion, but my question is, does anybody know from experience? I haven't had an offer accepted to even know myself.
Yeah.
Has anybody have the banks been always appraising at that number?
No.
Do the appraisers actually know the sale price before they go into it?
Yes.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, lots of appraisers have a copy of the agreement.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that, so one of the things, and that's why, one of the things on the listings where you start seeing, sometimes there's certain things on listings that the appraisers look at, they look at the listing price and then, sold for 500,000 more. So those red flags start, the appraiser situation where they're going, okay, I'm just going to sort of look at what's going on based on sales. And keep in mind, they take their sales based on 60, 90 days back. Right? So even if they take the current one, 3-4 months ago, they're going, well, but this one sold for this. So the average is probably going to be lower than the last one sold for. Okay. That's the reason why some of the private money is coming into fruition, because of the fact they're not getting appraised and they don't have the extra money. But it is definitely a conversation you need to have with your buyers with that understanding. This could happen. Okay. Has anybody had that with any of your deals in the last year or so?
Yep.
Andre, yeah?
Yeah, I had a young couple that bought a townhome in Milton, and they were approved for more than what we got the property for. But once the bank did the appraisal, they came back and said no, they would not provide the financing that was required. So I have used a friend of mine who is a very good mortgage guy, and he managed to get them exactly what you were saying, a 1-year deal at a higher interest rate, obviously, but that gave them the opportunity to then refinance in this year.
Yes.
And they didn't lose the deal, which was the most important point.
Yeah. And
Was it
that's
7, 2, and 2, Andre?
I beg your pardon?
Was it 7 or 8 plus 2 and 2? Like the interest rate was 7 or 8 plus 2%, min
Oh.
fee, 2%.
No. We managed to get them an interest rate of about 5, and there was a fixed amount. I think it was a couple of thousand that they had to pay for the fees,
yeah.
but it wasn't that bad.
Reasonable. That's pretty reasonable. We want that mortgage broker's number.
Yeah. I don't even do my seconds at 5%. So but if you do get in that situation, call me, all right? Because I might be able to help. But be aware, you just got to let your folks, your buyers know this is a possibility. Okay. So just something to keep in mind with that.
Sorry, Scott. The important issue is that your buyers may be approved, but the property is never approved until the bank sends their appraiser or does their appraisal.
Correct. Yes. And that's why when you're starting out with that discussion about financing, that you always stress that the amount that gets advanced is based on the appraised value, has nothing to do with the purchase price. Okay. So really have to stress that. And what you want to do, and Andre, thank you for sharing that, because if they come back and say, well, what does that exactly mean? And you can say, well, we had this happen in our brokerage. Here's what transpired. The buyers ended up having to take a small second, and the deal closed, and then they're in a position for a year down the road to refinance and bundle it back together as one mortgage. So, you can share that story in that situation. Okay. One of the things that I also believe is going to happen is GTA properties. Okay, more focus in the GTA on this particular item. And it was interesting, John, because you said, has anybody got a listing under $1 million in the GTA? There are no freeholds, by the way, under $1 million. So one of the things that I see happening is any property in the GTA that is below that $1 million, like if we look at last year, and even if we take sort of Mississauga and around the GTA area, Brampton and things like that, there were properties that were freehold semis, freehold townhouses that last year, 2021, could be purchased under $1 million. You know, you'd see them come out at $699, they'd sell for like $850. You know, anything like that range. That's going to be real hard to do this year. So anything under $1 million. So if you look at your condo townhouses, your downtown Toronto condos, I believe there's going to be a stronger market, and the appreciation value percentage wise, I believe is going to be higher for those than it's going to be for the freehold residentials. Everything is going to go up this year just because of the supply and demand, but anything that is below that threshold where people can still buy with that 5 to 8 or 10% down and go through the, you know, the CMHC fees is going to have a lot more pressure on it, because buyers that were hoping to be in a certain range and get a certain product are actually going to say, we just want to get into the marketplace. What can we buy for our budget? And that's going to push anything in that range higher up. Percentage wise, year over year, I see them being a higher appreciation than the stuff over $1 million.
We saw that in the condos last year too, right? So
Right.
condos were dead and you couldn't sell them at the beginning of the pandemic. And then everybody realized they couldn't afford to detach because they were jumping up, and everybody ran right back to the condos and the price went up again.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're still seeing, like, you know, we're still seeing that activity in that range where anything under, you get anything under that $1 million range. You know, right now I'm going to talk to GTA. There are lots of buyers for it. And it may not be the exact property they're looking for, but they're at the point where they just want to get into the marketplace. Okay. Another factor, and this is going to, my belief, it's also going to help Ontario. The government is opening the doors to 400,000 immigrants. Give you an idea what that means is that's the highest number that they're actually opening the doors for. And, you know, and these are well-qualified, well-financed immigration policies that they're using. Highest number since 1935. So and they plan on doing, they were starting to do it last year, and and in 2021, there was about half of that was the number they hit. They're now looking over for this year and next year to be over 400,000. Now that's across Canada, but majority really do try to end up in Ontario. So what does that do for pressure, additional pressure on supply and demand? It's going to add, right? So now there's another influence why supply and demand is going to be tough. It's going to be tough this year.
They're not immigrants like when my parents came in the 50s with 2 cents in their pocket. They're, like you said, they're well funded.
Yeah. Like there are certain qualifications. For instance, one of them is you have to invest $150,000 into an existing business that has 1 Canadian employee. Okay, that's one of the factors that they would allow looking at immigrating into Canada, and they're fast tracking this stuff. Okay. The other issue, one of the other things they're trying to do with immigration is they're looking for skilled workers, because since the pandemic, a lot of the skilled workers that would come to Canada aren't here, and they're trying to do it remotely. But I have a client of mine's the vice president of CGI, and their company supports all the IT for big banks, big investment companies. And he said, Scott, 2 years ago, he said, the majority of my staff were all IT people from all over the world working in my office in Toronto. He said, now I can't get them. And the hard part is being remote, I can't train them the way I need to train them. So immigration is starting to open up for those high skilled, and they're very well paid as well. So immigration, I think, is going to be, it's going to be another factor for supply and demand in all aspects of Ontario. Okay. another stat which I found very interesting is the age group 25 to 35. Okay, 25 to 35, 92% of them believe in buying a property versus renting. They also believe in buying a second investment property. And I know just from my own database clients where that's exactly what they've been doing. And what price range are they in? They're in that price range between 500 and 800. And they will look at buying something that is outside the GTA. Lots of their, the businesses that they're in, very well paying, especially if they are with companies that are the IT side. And I'm going to talk about that further, but look at your databases, look at your, you may have your database and go, okay, yeah, well, my database is older. Well, if they've got kids, that's who you want to be targeting. That's who you want to communicate with. So, that 25 to 35, you may want to even push it to 40, but they believe in real estate.
You know what? Can I say something, Scott?
Absolutely.
If you don't mind?
Yeah.
Over this past summer, you knew how busy Louisa and I were. And we've discussed this previously, a lot of the people actually, I would say 95% are between like 35 and 45. And they're coming up and they're buying houses like $600,000-$700,000. They're coming up in droves, but that is the age range that I have been dealing with over this past summer.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you're right.
Anita, or Diane, what are you guys seeing in the Niagara region?
It's a little bit of a smattering of everything. I think mostly our clients are a little bit of everything. I have some new buyers. I have some it's all over the board with it. But I will say, which you spoke about earlier, we're not $1 million houses typically. That's a little still higher end for us. Well, it is true, yeah. But that we're seeing there anything up to about $500,000 or $600,000 is the exact same house as a $400,000 house. Like there's a price, like the differential between that price range, which is, for us $300,000-$400,000, which is a lot of money. It's not a lot of different of a house, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like there's houses selling for $400,000 and then the house next door sells for $6,000. Same house, right? So we're seeing that's the big thing that we're seeing. Investor wise, lots and lots of people, investors are buying in Niagara, like just gobbling up the inventory. Like the small amount we have, they're just crushing it. And they don't care what they pay because it's cheap. They don't care what they pay. Right? They're overpaying by, $50,000, $100,000 as far as I can see, but they're still buying it and it's great, right? They're just living life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people are turning over houses. We are seeing people who bought like 6 months ago listing and getting, $100,000, $150,000 more.
Wow.
So.
And then that's going to, that's where I'm going to talk about the affordability as we go through 2022.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to ask about anybody sort of who does work outside let's call it the urban centers, is one of the other things I see happening, and based on the discussions with builders, is municipalities, towns, counties that are outside the GTA. They are going to have their new home construction is going crazy. They have builders that have been sitting on land that now are going, we have a marketplace where we want to build these things out. And the municipalities are trying to fast track some of these so that they can get these places built. If the infrastructure can withstand the increase in water, sewage, things like that. So places that are outside the GTA, in all aspects of Ontario, the municipalities are now, in certain ones, are really trying to fast track because they want that growth. They want that influx. So one of the things to look for would be, you know, where you're going to hear about certain builders, new construction sites opening up in places where the builders or the communities were like, yeah, we may get, you know, 50 new houses a year would be a big project for us. It's going to be a couple hundred houses. So just watch for that. I think you're going to hear, you probably see in some aspects, you'll hear about a, you know, lineup or a new subdivision sold out, which is like 2 or 3 hours away from Toronto in a day. Okay, so if you have any, you know, anybody in those areas or anybody looking to invest, don't just look immediately, you know, in your own backyard. There are opportunities that could be in the outskirts as well. Okay, especially for the brand new stuff. You know, lots of people have been moving out and to these other communities, but they haven't had the newness to buy. They could buy, you know, the old style bungalow. They could buy, you know, properties that are older and been fixed up, but brand new, they've been some limited supplies. So I do know of municipalities that are really trying to fast track to be able to get the builders to get that stuff in the ground. Okay. One of the things I see, especially just for the GTA, you're going to start seeing where there's already is some discussion about properties in Toronto that the municipality is trying to take away the single family unit zoning of it, which means that you could have a big house on a big lot where all your neighbors, you know, everything is single family. They had to be these minimum size lots. The city is actually trying to reverse and take away that single family zoning so that they would allow for an intensification, which means that there could be a house next to you that, let's call it what I would classify as an old brownstone style. Well, it's always been zoned single family residential, but now they're going to look at saying you could turn that into a triplex, a duplex, as long as you fall within what they're going to classify as being affordable housing requirements. Okay. The only issue with that is a long process. That is not going to impact or relieve the shortage of listings at all in the near future. Okay, so I don't see that as being a solution to the supply and demand, but it is something to be aware of because you will start hearing or be involved with some of that. But one of the other things that I think you will see more of this year, especially in the GTA, is what we classify as rear lane backlot properties. The city has approved that, and maybe in some of the other areas outside, but I do know that the city of Toronto has approved the fact that depending on if you have lots of properties in Toronto have the back laneways where you have a garage or you have a back driveway, they have approved that you can now do what is called a rear back lot severance and sell that particular property off as a separate unit.
Really?
Yes.
That is so weird.
Yeah. So what they're trying to do is obviously you're looking at something that could be an 800 square foot dwelling. Well, that 800 square foot dwelling, what they look as being falls within affordable housing. So it's a way, yeah, haven't put a price tag on it, but you will, if you haven't heard already, this is happening in the Toronto area. And the other thing that I see that we might hear more of in 2022 is a change in status for commercial and retail, where the municipalities will allow the change to residential. Because there are lots of storefronts that are commercial, that are vacant, where the small business person could not survive the pandemic. So now there are areas in Toronto where the storefronts have an apartment above. That main floor has never had a residential zoning to it. They're now looking at saying, we will allow that to be a residential zoning. so that they can build out another unit. Okay, so I think you're going to see that, as well as lots of commercial properties, lots of industrial warehousing that if they're in a certain pockets where they're not desirable or they just can't get tenants, municipality is encouraging that to be switched over to residential multi-unit, again, trying to fit into that affordable housing, which falls within a certain price range and a certain size. Okay. The issue with that is currently right now, they're trying to tell the builders it has to be a $400,000 sale price. And the builders are struggling with that because with the costs of build outs and the cost to do it over the last few years increasing, they can't fit within that budget. But I wouldn't be surprised, and based on my discussions, that that gets elevated, that base of 400 becomes a little bit higher and still will fit in within that affordable housing where the builders then do get some subsidies. Okay, they get reduced levies and things like that. So keep your ears open for that. More so in the GTA area. And just the fact that there will be some government incentives for things like that. Okay. Lots of talk about interest rates going up. Anybody got any input before I start on interest rates? Thoughts? What do you think you might see? What the impact might be?
I just heard 5 minutes ago, just 5 minutes before we started the 1 o'clock meeting here. I was just watching the news here as I'm sitting here, and they were just talking about they're expecting over the next 5 Bank of Canada meetings that they're going to do 0.25% each time.
Well,
So they're saying expect a 1 1/4 over the next 5 meetings.
quarters. Okay. All right. So here's again my thoughts and my discussions. I anticipate you're going to see, and this is right in my notes, so I already written it down before you told me. I anticipate that this year we're going to see a increase of 0.75%, which will fall right into about 1/4%. They were looking at doing an earlier rate increase, but because of the new strain, they're actually looking to delay that. So I believe by the end of the year, from where we are today, we'll have 0.75% higher. What's the impact of that? Okay. Well, here's my thoughts. The impact of that would be the initial perception from buyers will be, we better jump in now before we can't afford to because the interest rates are going up. So I believe, and I've seen this before, anybody that's been in the marketplace 10 to 15 years or longer, we've seen this before where an interest rate hike, you get the mortgage people running out and saying, okay, get your people qualified. We can give them 120 days, lock in the rate. So there's that little bit of a frenzy from the buyers saying that this is what, I better lock in now or I better buy now because the interest rates are going up. The reality, what I see as being the reality is the fixed rates are definitely going to be increasing. Your variable rate is going to be minimal and have less impact, and lots of people are being encouraged and will still take a variable rate versus a fixed rate. Okay. Second thing I see is the buyers right today. Okay. The buyers today have to qualify under the stress test, as we all know. What the impact is that the stress test today is 275 basis points higher than the posted rate. That is as of right today. When it started, when they brought in the stress test, it was 200 basis points higher. So the government right now does have in the position that even if the rates go up, and they will eventually go up, they have the flexibility that they can change and revert the stress test back. And there's discussion of this already with CMHC and the financial industries to revert it back to 200 basis points. So it's not going to affect the actual how people qualify. Okay, does that make sense? So,
If they do that.
right? So there is the perception that, yeah, the interest rates are geared because it's gonna, it's gonna slow down the marketplace. I disagree. I think you're gonna get a frenzy from people panicking, and then the qualifying is going to be adjusted. So yes, the stress test is still going to be there, but they're still going to be in the same realm as where they were. Okay?
No, I think you're right about the beginning, but now we got to look 5 years in advance, or 3 to 5 years in advance. And this brings me back to the late 80s, where people are starting to hand back houses because they can't pay their mortgages. We've seen that. I mean, there's a few of us on here that have seen it. And that's what fears me is if it goes up, if somebody's in it right now, stress test or not,
Yeah.
if it goes up 2 or 3%, and especially at these inflation prices they're paying today, there's going to be a lot of people handing houses back.
I don't disagree, but I think the way the stress test is designed is, as long as the people stay within the same budgetary restraints that they've had when the stress test was being applied, then there is that buffer that will alleviate some of it. But you will get people that, yeah, we got stress test approved, but this is what we're paying today. So they don't look at it as being future planning, let's call it. There will be some of that, absolutely. But I don't see that affecting 2022 today. Okay. But just the idea of keeping in mind that the stress test, the government has that flexibility, and it's something that they don't actually have to go to the government for. It's already in there that they can bring it down to the 200 basis points. Okay. Inventory. Anybody have any questions before, as we're going through here? Any comments, questions? Everybody's good. Any thoughts you want to put out before I continue on?
I'd like to take a poll.
On what?
Well, I know that we're not mortgage brokers and we don't have to give advice, but I've had, and I can't verify this, but I've had a mortgage broker say to me that in the last 30 years, variable's done better than fixed. So you have young people, they know what their income is, and they look at you and they say, what should I do? And I'm like, I don't have my crystal ball. You do what you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable knowing exactly what your payment's going to be for 5 years, then that's what you do. Because even though I have heard about these rates going up at the beginning of the year, I've also read that by the end of the year, they'll come back down again. I mean, it's all guesswork. I know they're educated people, but does anybody have an opinion on, if you're getting into a new house now, do you go variable or do you go fixed, or is it the same answer? Nobody knows.
It
But
is.
you're
Go ahead, sir.
correct. You're correct 100% about the 30 years, right? 30 years ago was 1981.
In
And
the last 30
1981
years.
was
Yeah.
the peak of the interest rates. And you're right. If somebody had a crystal ball and went variable 30 years ago, they did really well. No question about it. No question.
Yeah.
But is it reversing now? That's what you're really asking.
Well, and the idea is it gets down to someone's comfort level. And Carol, your comment about expressing to them, look, if you are concerned in any way about what your payments are going to be over a period of time, then absolutely taking a long term, then you know it's there. But understand that even with a variable, you can lock in.
Right.
Certainly start with a variable and then you can lock in, but you just have to make sure that you're in touch with your mortgage provider and understand what you have to do that.
Right.
Right. So some people are using that. And I have found that the buyers I've been dealing with, or agents that reflect to me, that buying group between 25 and 40 are quite comfortable with saying, hey, I'm okay taking the variable and I'll watch, I watch my finances, I'm online all the time. I have no problem saying, okay, lock me in.
Right.
And yet I have others that, especially the ones that are buying an investment property. I find with the investment property, I have, some of the investors are saying, the long-term tenant, I want to make sure I got a long-term tenant. So I'm locking in, and I know that for my investment, this is what my base expenses are moving forward. Right?
Thank you.
So that's my thoughts. Any other opinions?
I like to say something, Scott,
Yeah.
because you touched the word investor. So I'm very fascinated by this word. So most for the investor side, I would say it's on the other side, because like I, as an investor myself, we don't know when do I need to sell my property. So that time I would not take the risk of paying a huge penalty when it's time to sell.
Right.
So for variable, I know it's a 3 months interest. It's like $1,500, $2,000 exactly. But for a fixed rate, I just broke a mortgage and I had to pay 14,000 penalty for this.
Okay.
So for that, inclination is more towards what is my risk in case I have to break the mortgage rather than the interest rate.
Yeah, and I guess that is if you're looking at, the type of investments that you're doing, Gaurav, you're doing the buy, fix, and flip. So you're short term. Right?
Yeah, 1 to 2 years maybe.
Yeah. So if you're going to be, if your investors looking short term, then absolutely, you want to make sure you're not locked in anything that's going to cost you a penalty to get out. Very good point. But I have long-term investors that are saying, I don't want to worry about it. I just want to know I'm going to lock it in, and I'm not flipping it. I'm not selling it. But you never know, right? So, Carol, I guess one of the things to look at for your buyers are how long are they going to be in the property?
Exactly.
So, right. So if all of a sudden they're going to say, hey, we're going to look at moving up in 2 years, well, then they may want to look at the fact that you want to have that flexibility so you avoid any other penalty. Now, understanding that if they do move to another property, you could do what, lots of people probably haven't heard this word, but you could actually port your mortgage.
Yes.
So, which means you can take that mortgage with you. And if you need to increase it, then they blend the rate. So you avoid any type of penalty. Okay. But you're not hearing about lots of that because, people haven't been doing it and don't need to do it. But just something to look at, for those, good question. And just, it really is, something that they have to look at from both sides and determine what they're more comfortable with. And how long are they expecting to have that mortgage? Okay. Inventory. And, I've talked about this as being a supply and demand, and you hear that all the time. Definitely is a supply and demand marketplace we're in, and it's going to continue for 2022. I'm going to let you know why. Right now, in the majority of the marketplaces, there is under 2 months of inventory. And in some of the communities, there's less than 1 month of inventory. A balanced marketplace is 3 to 4 months and closer to 5 for a balanced market. With the levels of inventory that we're at right now, we would have to see several months in a row of overstock of listings hitting the marketplace. So look at it as an average. If you're looking at, you're at a 1 or 2% average, and you're looking to get to a 3 to 5% average, that's going to be your average. You have to be at 8 or 9 for several months in a row to get that average back down. That is not going to happen with inventory at all this year. Okay. So my belief is we are in for a seller's market majority of the year. And we're just gonna have to deal with it. There is not going to be enough influx of listings to switch it to a balanced marketplace.
Correct me if I go checking my memory, but in Oakville, for instance, we used to have, like, we're talking 4 years ago, say, an average of 3,500 homes on the market.
Mhm.
Is that right? That's about right, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's 55.
Yeah, like it's, and it's every community. Like it's every community. It is, I talked to our broker in Sudbury and I said, so what's your, he says, normally Scott in Sudbury, we carry, there's usually 12 to 1,400 listings on our board. They had less than 100 this week. I could talk to, Steve Bernay, he was on, and, anything in the Ottawa area, anything in Niagara, anywhere we go right now, there is no inventory and it's not going to change. So despite all the ideas they talk about affordability and how they're looking at bringing properties to market, I do not see that happening. And there's no way that there are going to be enough of them to make this a balanced marketplace.
And it's not
incredibly
even
frustrating.
numbers. It's
Yeah.
not even numbers of listings. It's that there's nothing that's detached under $2 million, or there's one, or there's two, but it's insane.
Yes, and that's, and just as, what Diane and Anita were saying about Niagara, like, look at the value increases. And we're gonna talk about that very shortly, but, so the idea of thinking that your buyers are gonna wait for the balanced market this year, it's not happening. Okay. Interesting stat I came across, and this deals sort of with Canada now. And it's from a really unlikely source that I came across. U-Haul. So U-Haul, who does, your self-drive, self-pack, takeaway trailers and vans and all that stuff, they actually keep stats on one-way hauls. Okay. So what they consider to be a one-way haul, you pick it up at this place and you're going one way and you're dropping it off and you're not doing a turnaround. So they actually track this, and they track it every year. And there were some interesting stats that I came across. Well, the U-Haul one-way trends for 2021. BC, the province of BC, is usually the #1 destination for U-Haul one-way trends, which means you're getting people from either within the province or outside the province doing a move to BC. Has always been #1 several years. Well, it's #2 in 2021. #1, Alberta. Alberta saw the most one-way U-Haul trends in all of 2021.
In or out of Alberta?
Into Alberta.
Wow.
Okay, so BC is usually, all these are into, okay? All these are into. So in 2021, Alberta, #1 destination for U-Haul.
I can explain that. And I can,
Let me-
okay.
Yeah, I know. And let me just finish because there's some surprising notes here and then we'll have an open discussion. Thanks, John. In 2020, Ontario was #10 for one-way inbound. 2021, #3. So what that tells me is a lot more people who in 2020 moved out or leaving Ontario, 2021 coming back. So one of the things you look at is, what are the reasons for that? 2020, everybody was trying to escape the centers, get away from the pandemic. 2021, vaccines are in. Looks like we're getting through the panic part of it per se, and job and economy were big factors, more so for Ontario. High-paying jobs, secure jobs, people moving out of some of the other provinces that had moved out to other areas, moving back in. Alberta And John, I'm going to ask for your opinion here, but based on my research, one of the things Alberta has done is it's the most affordable province right now over the last few years, that their marketplace, because of let's say the impact of the oil industry, really declined. Okay, 2021, where we were seeing appreciations in double digits across Canada, Alberta was 6%. They also have put in place, the government has incentives for people moving to Alberta as permanent residents. Okay, so from that, what I see and what I look at across Canada, if I'm dealing with investors, I'm saying, you know what, my belief is I'd be looking at buying back in Alberta as an investor or buying in Alberta. So as a realtor, I think you should be reaching out to realtors and connect with people in Calgary, Edmonton, Calgary more so. The lifestyle in Calgary, because you're closer to the steels, closer to there's a bit more of a lifestyle per se versus being in Edmonton, but both areas and areas around outside there. But I'd be looking at saying, as an investor over the next 5 years, especially if we see the economy and the oil come back, which anticipation short term it might, not a bad thing to look at buying something in Alberta, because if you're having that number one influx of people from Canada going to Alberta, they got to live somewhere. So maybe buying a small condo townhouse, renting it out. And John, you did a lot of work in Calgary, in Alberta, and I know you keep tabs on what's going on there. Any insight?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, probably you guys don't know, I'm an Albertan. I moved here 20 years ago. I did all my real estate in Alberta. Here's the biggest thing that people, and it goes back to your very first conversation, Scott, was your immigration.
Yeah.
Immigrants came to Canada, they wanted to be in Toronto or Vancouver or maybe Montreal. Now, those same immigrants that are in those cities are finally saying, I can't afford a house, especially the ones that aren't coming in with the big package like they are now. Alberta's, and I don't think there's anything on this, but I see it every time I go home, is the number of immigrants that are in those towns and cities have this multiplied big time, big time. So the ones who are really moving oh, sorry about that. Shut this off. The ones who are moving, they're actually coming probably from areas where they can't afford to buy a house, because the big dream is to buy a house. So they're going to Alberta because there hasn't been really the work there because of the oil patch, but the opportunity to buy a property and to do the menial jobs that people think they're too good to do. And there's always lots of that available. And they're doing that because you can get into a house for instance, my brothers and sisters' houses that are there, they're worth about $400,000 or $500,000. They're worth about 1.8 million here. So let's move to Alberta, get a house. The job will eventually come when things get better, as Alberta is like this, right?
Right.
So yeah, you're 100%. I'm not surprised at that at all about your comment about moving to Alberta.
Yeah, and I can share a stat from Mike Berman, our broker in North Bay, does a lot of investment deals with a lot of investment companies, and over the years they've been buying in North Bay. In 2021, one of his investment companies sold 20 properties in North Bay and moved all the money to Alberta. So one of the things you may investigate and look at, because the referrals, absolutely, you can refer your clients out there, refer your investors, but maybe something where you do your own research, look at your database and say, hey, just want to let you know, here's what we're seeing, here's what we anticipate. If you're, maybe the Ontario may not be the right spot to invest, but here's where I think you can. And keep in mind that also in Alberta, the idea of a property management company is very, very common. Okay, where you can buy a property and it will have built-in property management. Buy an investment property where you might pay 12 to 15%, but it's managed, so your investors don't have to worry about, the property. Just another thing, sort of, that I started investigating once I started seeing where the provincial and, provincial transitions were happening, thanks to U-Haul. So, price appreciation, just for everybody's understanding, the GTA 2021 was up 24.2% on average. Ottawa was 20% based across all the different properties. Areas outside the GTA. Okay, give you an idea, and Anita, Diane, I don't know the stat for Niagara, but I do believe it's over 30% last year. So communities that are outside the area last year, and this is where the affordability, we're going to talk about that. There are communities in Ontario that had 60% and above appreciation last year. Trenton, anybody know where Trenton is? Basically between, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, over 300% appreciation last year.
Wow.
Like incredible, right?
Nuts.
And where were all those buyers coming from?
The GTA.
Right, GTA. So looking at that, the average across Canada, average appreciation across all communities across Canada, 20%. So then you look at it and go, okay, well, as we talked about Calgary or Alberta and Saskatchewan to the same degree, because they do follow into sort of a lot of that same industries, there was around 6%. So as an investor, where do you look for, right? A return. So what does this all mean? Here's what I see as a realtor. Here's some of the points. 2022, across Canada, we're going to have less units sold than we had in 2021. Okay, 2021 was a strong year for units sold. I believe, based on my research, that we're going to have less units sold in 2022 than we had in 2021. What does that mean? It means that you as an agent are really going to have to look at what do you need to do to be able to capitalize on the certain percentage of unit sales that you can attribute to. In Ontario, okay, in 2021, unit sales in area code 416, unit sales were up 23.6%. Sorry, let me correct that. Outside the 416 was 23.6%. 416, unit sales increased in 2021 by 36.8%. Tells me that there are people now that are looking at saying, okay, 2020, get away from the centers, as we talked about. 2021 was starting to move back to the urban areas or just outside the urban areas. That trend is going to continue. Toronto resurgence, being called back to the office, immigration increased in Canada, and that centers into your urban areas, at least in Ontario. We look at Ottawa, we look at Toronto. Those are going to be influences. The other influence is jobs, okay? The economy in Ontario, despite anybody's political issues or anything like that, the economy is very strong. It is attracting lots of high IT talent in all aspects, okay? When I talk IT, I don't just mean someone working on just the IT idea, artificial intelligence, things like that. Especially in around the GTA, in Toronto or around the GTA, you have high paying jobs that people are moving back to, such as you've got head offices, you've got the big name companies, to the point where they actually call Toronto GTA Silicon Valley North. That is your age group, 25 to 40, that are in those jobs. So now you've got that influx of job security, high paying jobs. It is going to still keep this area busy, okay? Outside of Toronto, there's what's happening is we'll still benefit from buyers from the centers such as Ottawa, Toronto, the outside communities, but the numbers aren't going to be as high. And the reason I say the unit sales aren't going to be as high is because the benefit of moving out has decreased over 2021 because of the higher appreciation that took place in those areas outside, let's call it the centers. So the advantage of moving out and I'm going to be able to buy a place 2 hours from Toronto and I'm going to buy it for $1 million less, 500,000 less, a couple 100,000 less. That is changed. So now you have the influx where you have people that are not going to move out. They're still going to be strong. There's still going to be lots of buyers, but there's going to be less that are going to buy this year because they can't make the move out. The difference of the price they're going to save is going to stop the people that were selling in Toronto, selling in Ottawa, and moving out because there's not that big of advantage anymore. Someone's not going to move out and just put 100 grand in their pocket. They were looking to put, from the GTA, they were looking to say, if I could sell, put 500,000 in my pocket. Well, that's not happening as much. So I think that's going to decrease the unit sales. The uncertainty of the work from home scenario is going to make people hesitant to move further out. Whereas 2 years ago, 18 months ago, that was like, hey, we're doing this full, you're going to be doing this for the next number of years to come. So people were doing that. They were escaping the urban areas. Based on, as we see from the recap of 2021, they're moving back into the urban areas. So what I see is the idea of escaping the pandemic from the GTA, not a big influence anymore. Because of the vaccinations and jobs being pulled back in. So I do see that as being a factor in the fact that you're going to get buyers that are going to pull themselves out of the market. And those buyers that are pulling themselves out of the market are also sellers that are deciding to say, you know what, we're just going to stay where we are. And that's going to happen a lot in Ontario and other areas that you've seen the appreciation, but more so in Ontario. People understand that the majority of trades that happened across, the CMHC, across Korea, things like that, it's all in Ontario. Ontario is 85,000 realtors of 110,000 realtors across Canada. So your majority of transactions happen in Ontario. So I anticipate, and on my research and discussions with different people, including Korea, there will be less units sold, and it's more so because of the affordability has decreased. The advantage of moving out has decreased. Interest rates will rise, and you're going to get folks that were looking at moving out are just going to stay put. So twofold is lesser units available, lesser units sold. Okay, thoughts on that? Am I wrong? Any where you think any opinions? Yeah, Anita?
So in Niagara specifically, we saw like the stats just came out, 33% increase. And last year our average price was like 535. This is all for Niagara, the whole region, right?
Yeah.
535. And for 2021 it was 720.
Right.
So that's so people who bought last year are selling this year and making, putting their money in the pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have a lot of people doing that, and we have vacant houses sitting, like just sitting because they're just waiting for the appreciation and going to sell.
Right. And so if you look at if you take that number and you think, okay, so somebody who was looking in the GTA to sell, move to Niagara, hoping that they would be able to have a big savings difference. Well, that savings difference now is 200,000 less on average, if not more, right? So as a first-time buyer, first-time buyers were buying, a year and a half ago in Niagara region for 400. And then that range, Anita, at 450,
Pretty much, yep.
right? So what is it today? That's 6,
6. Yeah.
right?
So
So I think you're gonna see, that advantage is going to take some of the buyers out of the marketplace. Still gonna be a seller's market, still gonna sell real estate, but unit sales at the end of the year, I anticipate will be not much less, but I think they're gonna be less just because of the affordability and the fact of the exodus from the city isn't happening as strongly as it has the last 18 months. What does it mean for you as realtors? I would suggest, and this is just my opinion, seeing all of this, the realtors that are going to be successful during 2022 are realtors that are going to concentrate on being listing inventory conscious, which means how are you looking at cultivating listings? Okay. Does that mean you're really working your database? Does it mean you're really focusing your social media on working at listing information? Are you working a farm area? So those things you need to look at and make sure somewhere in your repertoire you are doing some kind of prospecting for listings. Listing inventory is going to be very, very important this year. And you have to do it consistently. You can't just turn on the switch and go, okay, I want to go and get a listing. You need to put into your plan for 2022 consistent marketing and prospecting for listings, whatever that is. Okay, and anybody wants to talk to me individually about it, no matter where you are, which part of our offices are, I'm certainly here to help you on that. But you need to look at doing that because that's going to be really important. Buyer agents, if you thought 2021 was going to be stressful, 2022, I'm afraid my opinion is it's even going to be more stressful because you're really going to need to have patience with your buyers, understanding all of the factors that we talked about, the idea of the affordability, the idea of financing challenges, price increases, the fact that maybe moving out is, where they thought they would move out, they would, have an opportunity. There are, Anita and I know Diane, with the listings you've had multiple offers on them. I can actually say, probably 7-8 years ago, I did a meeting in Niagara Falls and the agents and I said, multiple offers are coming to Niagara. And the comment I got, oh, we'll never see that, Scott. But now that will happen here.
funny story, Scott. We just had the conversation about deposits for listings.
Yeah.
And, I remember the day you sat us down and said, no more $500 deposits, guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're like, at least 1,000 guys. And we're like, 1,000, oh my God. And now it's like easy, like 20 to 30 to 40. So it's kind of funny now that we're,
Yeah.
How long ago I was taking $500 for a couch.
I know. Cash. It was like, no, we don't take cash.
You're like, oh, just drop it off at the desk. She'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, Eric.
I gotta go.
All
I gotta
right.
go run an offer real quick.
All right, buddy. Good
So-
luck. All the best.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, those are my thoughts. So as a buyer agent, you're gonna have to show patience. You're probably gonna have to run with more buyers because you're gonna have buyers that are gonna pull out. You're gonna have buyers that are gonna say, you know what, based on everything we've been doing, we just don't see making this happen under these conditions. You're really gonna have to, as we talked about earlier, working with buyers, your due diligence in the beginning is going to be really, really important with the financing, with everything that needs to be organized, so that if you're out there with the buyers, you know that you're dealing with a bona fide situation. Buyer agency agreements, I know some of you just wait to the last minute. That's up to you, but understand, having, buyers are gonna run around and try and find the opportunity as much as they were doing in 2021. 2022 is even gonna be a little tougher for them. And so you're really gonna have to show your, patience, as I say, with them, and you're really gonna have to guide them. So a lot more communication. I would suggest that you use, instead of just verbal language with your buyers, you really, start looking at sending them articles and third-party things about, what's going on from a buyer's perspective. CMHC has stuff. Korea does a lot of good stuff. Local boards have lots of good stuff. Okay. So I think from that point of view, you really need to look at servicing those buyers and understand it's going to be frustrating. Okay. Lack of inventory is still going to be there. The ease of buying for buyers, as we talked outside the GTA, I see has dwindled and will continue to dwindle as prices go up. The flexibility of work from home, it's been restricted. So now they may, the people that thought I'm 100% work from home, there's some restrictions there. Overall, it's still going to be a really good year. 2022 is, but you're really going to, as agents, doesn't matter where you are, you really got to be disciplined on your work habits, be very thorough working with buyers, really know your stuff, and really keep in contact with what's going on with the financial sides, the options that you could use financially. I'm always here if you want to reach out, let me know what your thoughts are, what's going on. I do a fair bit of looking at everything from all angles, from all areas that we service. And those are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Who's got any thoughts? I know this is longer than we anticipated, but I thought it was important to sort of cover all aspects of what I see happening in 2022.
Well, in my area, I think it's a tiny bit different. I have a property closing tomorrow that the guy bought sight unseen. And I also have an offer on the table today for another property, vacant lot, again, sight unseen. And that's actually from a realtor from Toronto that's buying it for himself. And when I excused myself one of these times, I have another offer coming in, sight unseen, on the same property. People are coming up here in droves looking for land.
Land, right?
Yeah. Which you can't finance. The bank won't finance land.
Right. Yeah.
Where is up here, Nancy?
Sundridge. I'm 45 minutes north of Huntsville.
So the way I describe it is between Huntsville and North Bay. That is,
Yeah, kind of bang in the middle.
Nancy's farm area. She's been up there since May and really been doing well up there, understanding that she lived up there before, moved back to the city, and has moved back up there and doing a great job with the real estate she's taken on up there. So any referrals in that area, she does everything from vacant land to houses to waterfront.
And I'll walk, and I will walk through the lake to show that property.
Yeah, showing properties on snowmobiles and stuff. So all kinds of different stuff. So we got, as I say, we got lots of agents throughout Ontario in our group, which is kind of cool. Any other thoughts, any opinions on what I shared? Is it valuable? Is it just earful? Yeah, Anita. You're on mute, Anita. Unmute yourself.
There you go.
There
I have
you
a
go.
question. When you have multiple offers on a property and you know that realtor has not shown your property, I always give that a little bit of a, ugh. And I don't know if that's just me because, I'm small town hick girl down here in Niagara, but is that something that if you were in the GTA and someone didn't show the property and came with an offer that was pretty close to, one of the best, would you still look back at because they haven't seen the property? Would that be anybody's concern, or is it just, I'm just silly thinking?
Or your big question is, did they see the property through somebody else? Did they see it through maybe even yourself and they're not telling you? And
Well, it wouldn't be through me because I'm, you have to sign a buyer agency to show a property with me.
Right.
But I mean, but somebody else, yeah, they could have seen it with another realtor. You're correct.
But the other thing too, with vacant land, they don't need to see it with a realtor. They can just go and you don't even know that they're looking at it. They can just go and drive by and walk the property and you don't even know.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's different from a house where you need a lockbox and all of that.
Right.
But-
Yeah,
but-
vacant land's different. But I mean, like when I have a listing of a house, I always those ones always make me nervous.
So in the actual agreement, there is a clause that states that the buyers had the opportunity. And, you know, sometimes it refers to had the opportunity of an inspection. It actually means they had the opportunity to view the property. Okay?
Right.
So if your concern is, I totally agree with you, because I've had this too, where anytime I have multiple offers, usually it gets down to, you may have 10, there might be 2 or 3 that are within reason. I always reach out to those agents and I always say, so when you went through the property, what do you feel, how do you feel your clients are? Because you're one of 3 offers that is close. We have some concerns. We were looking at trying to make sure that, my sellers are looking. Now we get down to where they want to know about the buyer. What can you share anything with me before we look at going forward? And there are cases where the agent turns around and says, yeah, well, I didn't really show it to them. I said, oh, okay. So what can you tell me about your buyers? Well, and then they go, well, what is it you're looking for? I'll see if I can get it from my buyer. I said, no, I'm just asking. We're trying to understand the emotional impact of your buyer. And I had this happen in October, and my clients ended up taking a lower price offer because the agent showed it 3 times to the same buyer, gave us a whole description on the buyers, and they were wanting to live in this area. And I said, look, this one's $5,000 more. And they said, we just don't get a good feeling from the agent, really wasn't really sharing much. And I said, well, your choice. And so I totally understand. There's lots of agents that are just sending their people out to go look, or they have team members that are showing the property and they're putting the offer in as the team leader and have no clue about the property.
Mhm.
As long as you have no conditions, big deposit, firm, I wouldn't say there's a concern, because there's no out. They can't use the out by saying, well, my agent never showed it to me.
Well, and that's actually very true. I mean, I'm on a selling end of these properties, but from a buying end, we have a clause that clearly states that the realty executive's representative has not shown you all of the property stakes, because I'm not walking 70 acres in the middle of winter, right? So there is a clause in there saying that we haven't pointed out all of the property stakes, which kind of covers our ass a little bit in one perspective.
And in response to Anita, from your point of view, if you are a buyer agent, show the property.
Mhm.
Your broker is telling you to show the property, okay? Because the issue is, if there is an issue after closing and it turns out you never went and looked at the property,
Do your due diligence.
Rico will turn around and say, this may null and void your insurance. And you'd be on your own for any stuff. Okay?
Yeah, I would never make an offer, or well, I would never sell a property that I haven't seen personally or Jay hasn't seen. Because to me, that's when people call, they're like, oh, I want that house, let's make an offer. I'm like, no, we got to go see it. Like, we got to see it. Like, not the way I'm going to work, right?
Yeah.
Especially down here. I
Okay,
can
best
get up and go
practices.
anywhere.
You're representing the buyer. Absolutely. You have to do your due diligence. You've got to go through that property. You've got to make sure that you really, there's things there that you may see as the professional that you need to bring to their attention that they may not have seen. Okay. So really important that, from the listing side though, Anita, from the listing side, there's nothing wrong with you accepting an offer from a buyer that the agent didn't show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's just before I take off here. Here's what I'm finding on my last 3 offers I did in December. Didn't get any of them, but I got a call from the listing realtor. It says, yeah, we've worked you down to the 3 best offers, which I was one of them. And then they're squeezing you for more.
Yep.
And what we're all, that particular one now was over 202,000 over asking, right? And I got this call saying, okay, you know, you're one of 3 offers. So we're looking at all 3 of you. They called each one of us
Mhm.
to try to squeeze more money. Now, is that right?
Yep.
They can do
Yeah.
that, eh?
You can do that. Absolutely. You know, you get, as the listing agent, you have to say to your sellers, please understand that right now you have 3 offers on the table. You can, you know, everybody knows you can either accept one, you can work with one, you can work with none. You can go back to these ones and say, we're going to give you another, usually it's another 45 minutes or an hour to see if your people would improve. And you have to say to the seller, please understand, if we go back, there's a chance that they may pull out. Is that the chance you want to take?
Yeah.
Right? But more than not, what happens, John, is at least one of those parties is coming back with what they had or a little bit better.
Right.
So, Steve, you were looking to a comment or something like?
I had a couple of transactions. I'm out in Ottawa, and I
Yeah.
had some Toronto agents submitting offers on my listing sight unseen. And one thing I've noticed when they usually put in a final walkthrough, and at that final walkthrough, they come back with a lot of questions and a lot of, well, we noticed the screens are missing, and we noticed this. Well, if you would have showed the property in person, you would have noticed these things.
Yeah.
So if the price is just a couple of $100 or $1,000, a lot of times I'll favor somebody that actually showed the property. But if the difference is $5,000 to $10,000 more, then we'll consider those offers.
Right.
So it's just one of those that when you do the final walkthrough in Ottawa, for some reason now, 99% of the offers come with a final walkthrough. We're getting a lot more questions, a lot more friction at the closing if it's purchase sight unseen.
Right. And with you are as a listing agent going to accept an offer from an agent or any offer as the listing agent, you are, what I'm seeing lots of is where they're not putting it conditional on home inspection, they're not doing a home inspection, but they're putting in the clauses that say the seller represents and warrants that the heat, the hydro, and I laughed at one I got, they even included a septic tank was in good working order, and I'm going, it's municipal water, municipal sewer, so you know the agent didn't, you know, but their agents are putting in all of these warranties, okay, but not putting in a home inspection. You as the agent have the right to, you know, as a seller's agent, I would never get my people to agree to that. Okay, that's my opinion, that's how I do it. There are some standard little warranties, sure, but the ones that warrant everything, for instance, there is one that talks about the heating, the hydro. People basically think about it. People move in, one of the receptacle plugs doesn't work. Well, you've warranted that plug's working. All right, so just a thought, just want to, you know, put that out there. As a listing agent, you know, you're going to get a bunch of offers that are asking for all these different warranties. I strongly recommend you don't accept them. Tell the people to do a home inspection, or you as the listing agent, do a pre-list home inspection, get permission from the home inspector just to share it as information purposes only, and hand it out to anybody that registers an offer. Okay. Really went a little bit over our normal hour time. Before we wrap up, any more thoughts, questions? Okay, I have recorded this. I will send this out to everybody just so you've got some reference. And we'll be doing more of this stuff, just talking about what's going on in the marketplace. And hopefully everybody I know is going to have a great 2022. Practice some patience and understanding that when you start seeing that frustration, you can go back and say, I remember in January, we had this discussion. All right. All the best, everybody. Stay
Thanks,
safe.
Scott.
Yeah.
No,
Good
I
luck,
said thanks.
everybody.
That was
Have a
great.
great year.
All right.
Everybody, happy new year.
Take care.
Happy New
Goodbye.
Year.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
All right.